90s, exactly where we've, some of the things that I've seen and where we've sort of come along in that journey and where we're headed. So I'll look also a little bit at the future of banking. We've touched on most of these things, but I'll go into a little bit more detail around the security side of things. There may be some things that you'd be interested in. I've got a whole lot of information, probably a lot of it's very boring, but I'll try and give some examples of things that we see day to day, and that's what Paul and I know and see each day, and that's what we're good at. But we're also customers just like everyone else, and yeah, we'll do questions afterwards as well. And so I mentioned before I started in the 90s, and I started with Suncorp, who now with the CBA, which is obviously number one. But Suncorp was a building society which became a bank, but also did a lot of general insurance. They've now become a huge insurance group that dabbles in banking. So I think I made the change at the right time. But coming from that insurance background that I did, it does give you a lot of insight into loss and risk and things like that. So I've seen a lot of situations over the years, and from the old-fashioned way of banking, which was cash. Now, just in terms of, at the bank, I'm working at the bank. When I joined the bank, being robbed was something that you thought about, and something that when you joined and they spoke about and you did training on, you took very seriously, because you could really see that that could actually happen. And you would be working with people that had actually happened to. Now that's pretty rare now. I can tell you it is very rare. You would struggle to go to a branch and find somebody who's actually been robbed. Crime, as we know it now in the bank, and robbing the bank as such, is now probably more the electronic crime and fraud that has created a lot of anxiety and fear, a bit of fear mongering. Gives a lot of gets a lot of press on Current Affair and those sorts of shows. But we're going to dispel a couple of those little things. There are some real things there as well, so we'll cover those as well. But just going back to the cash side of things, when I started in banking, people carried a lot of cash around, much more so than now, and Paul spoke about that as well. You may be one of those people that still does. I know some people still do have a bit of cash that comes in from time to time that smells of mothballs, and that's why those people tend to get broken into a lot, and we hear about that on the news and in the press. So having that cash at home, there is risk in that. Cash in a lot of countries is paper, so if you're having a fire or a flood at home, that cash goes. Generally cash is not insurable because of the high risk, so cash is gone, essentially. What we're looking at with our electronic banking, a lot of times, what has happened is traceable. We spoke about, trails being left and things generating to let people know what's happening with their banking, and more people in society have or are going to have a mobile phone or a computer, and if you're on those things every day, you're getting updates constantly, and the current generation coming through, they know what's happening with their friends as it happens, which is even a different concept for myself, being a Gen X. So just getting on to a little bit of the electronic crime, and specifically around internet banking. If there was a lot of this happening in terms of dollars and loss, a bank, even a bank such as the CBA, wouldn't be able to offer a 100% guarantee over the funds that people have in their accounts and that they have, and are using through online banking. There potentially could be an exposure there for some huge financial losses, and we'll go into that. I'm just going to say over the last 10 years or so, some of the things that we have seen over the time, because when things happen with people's money, we certainly know about it at the branch. I mean, the branch is where people will come in, be it, something has happened and they're not quite sure, or they're not happy, or whatever it is, we have to deal with it when it happens. So probably in the last 10 years or so, we saw some things like ATM skimming devices. Now, I'll probably just look for nods or heads as I go through a couple of these things, but basically an ATM skimming device was a piece of equipment that fitted over the slot where your card went into the ATM, and somebody remotely or even a little transmitter there at the ATM could pick up some information off the card. Now, this initially, there was quite a few of these happened within Australia, but it was something that the banks always wore as far as a cost point of view, and it became a very easy thing for the banks to spot. It became something that even clients became aware of within a matter of weeks and months, and it's something that died out very quickly. Something else that then popped up was we would see, when email became a lot more popular, we would see these phishing scams where you know, you'd get an email supposedly from your bank. It would have a link. It might say something like, your internet banking details have been compromised. Need you to sign in right now and here. Here's the box to put your information in. Of course, that information would go straight off to a bad guy sitting somewhere who would take that information. Now, Paul spoke about when you're doing a transfer to a third party for the first time. That extra layer of security now that has come in means that if your details are compromised, there is really nothing that person can do with that. Going back sort of 5 to 10 years, people could clean out your account and that sort of thing. Once again, you know, I don't know a client that's ever been out of pocket $1. It does create and has created a lot of angst and worry for people, and I guess that their faith and trust, you know, has been forever tarnished. I was talking to Paul earlier on about people who bought shares when shares were supposedly the next great thing, and then the share market crashed and people were never to buy shares again because of that experience. So once you've had an experience, I guess it would sort of you know, discourage you for doing that one for quite some time. But once again, you know, I don't know any clients that ever were out of pocket a cent. We saw with computers being taken up more frequently, people who would go and grab computers and not put, in the early days, not put the protection on their computers that enable people to come in with, you know, something like a firewall that would prevent somebody coming in and actually spying on you on your computer and getting those details that way. So that was something else that people, that was happening. You know, once again, you know, the demand for something to protect against that saw, you know, companies like Norton and McAfee and all those other companies provide software that combats that sort of stuff. And as long as you have that up and running and it searches your computer regularly, it does tend to be fairly effective at pulling that stuff up. You know, any time that there is an opportunity for someone to make $1 illicitly, I guess, you know, a criminal element will come in to exploit it, and I don't know that that's something that will ever go. It's probably just a human nature thing, but you know, as these things have come up, it's really been fairly quick that they've been stamped out and people have moved on to something else. So yeah, that's why we do need to be aware of what these things are, and the banks now have a huge investment in staff and software and systems that detect these things. They work in with the federal police. I'm probably skipping ahead a little bit here, but they work in quite closely with the federal police. So usually by the time a customer has come into the bank to report something, through the police they're aware of what exactly the scam is, where the scammers live and reside and what they're doing, what country they're in, all that sort of stuff, and they know how they've done it. So it's just a matter of actually getting some things shut down as far as if there's a site or a means that people are doing these things. Now, in the news you've probably heard about a remote scanning device. So what we have heard is, you know, someone might walk past you and you've got your card in your pocket and they might be able to take that information off your card and go do something with it. Now, that's a bit of a myth. It's actually, you know, you would need to come right up to that card. Is that right, Paul? Come right up to that card to even take the information off there. So that one was probably a little bit of a false start. And you know, of course, the change that we saw, and I spoke about when I started, the change that we saw, you know, moved so rapidly that the moment something new comes up, there's a lot of fear there, and even in the bank, things move so rapidly for us in the bank, it does create a lot of angst for people, particularly older staff, trying to get to grips with changes as things do change. So we also spoke about the older people who a lot of this has sort of gone past them, and we sort of did a bit of a backtrack there, and you know, people spoke about cashless society, a bit of a backpedal there where, you know, people said 10 years ago there won't be cash in 10 years. Well, I've still got cash in my pocket. So obviously, you know, a bit of panic sets in sometimes where it doesn't necessarily need to. I'm going to touch, the last one here is credit card fraud. Now, probably all of us would know somebody